Hello and welcome to an episode of the Manufacture Leads podcast with me, Mark Bracknell, Managing Director of Theo James Recruitment. Today, we're welcoming Steve Drew, the founder and director of Nano. I loved this episode. It was one where it was more of a podcast conversation than an interview. And it was an entertaining episode, which was, for me, very important to have. Steve's passion is the new generation and the lack of people coming into the industry. His industry in particular is electronics. So we talked about that in isolation, but the topic was definitely for all areas of manufacturing and engineering. There's no one answer to the problem of the lack of people coming into industry, but we talk about them all and possible solutions and how the industry can come together to help solve this real problem. And Steve is so passionate about it, and I think if we can listen, do something and start to create a movement which is ultimately going to help the new generation and help our industry and help the UK manufacturing and engineering industry, it's got to be good. It's got to be a positive thing. So this felt like a really powerful episode. We also then linked it into electronics and supply chain and what Nano do. And there's some nice lessons there in terms of setting up the right supply chain for your manufacturing business or your contract manufacturing business. So there's some good lessons there to be had as well, alongside some other fun rants we had about people paying late and all sorts of other stuff. So I think you're going to hopefully enjoy this episode. Please grab a coffee, listen, watch, whatever you want to do. I would massively appreciate it. And really pleased to be on it of just clicking like and subscribe. It really helps grow the show and grow the channel. So I'll be forever in your debt if you wouldn't mind just clicking that like and subscribe button now. Hope you enjoy the episode. Speak soon. Right, a massive warm welcome today to Steve Drew, who is the director and founder of Nano. How are we doing, Steve? All right?
All very good. Yes, thank you for a Thursday afternoon. So.
Absolutely. So thank you very much for coming on today. Looking forward to this. Now, obviously, we'll deep dive into the business and electronics and all things like that. But initially, the first question is the same question I ask everyone that comes on. What does it mean to you to be a leader, would you say?
To be honest, I've never thought myself as one. I've most of my career has been spent working for smaller companies. So I guess I've never really been in that position. I have managed people. I guess I've never felt myself like that. I think one of my criticisms when I was very young in my career and I was seen as a manager was I was too close to the people below me, if you like. I could never put myself in that position. So I guess I've never felt like a leader. I guess lead by example if that's the way forward.
Yeah.
Not do as I say, but this is what I would do.
Yeah, I agree. I think the term leadership is very broad and subjective, I think there's a difference between. I mean, what do you think? What do you think the difference is between management and leadership? Would you say that is more for you, that leading from the front piece?
I think it is. I guess every industry is different and every situation is different, right? Obviously, if you're in the army, you do as you're told, and the leader is ultimately has the final say. Obviously, in industry and in the office, it's slightly different. I prefer people that listen because everyone's got an opinion, right? It may not be the right opinion, but it's someone that does listen because there is valid opinions out there. But I've always tried to be as good as I can be, and then hopefully that rubs off on people. I think we sort of touched on it in the sort of pre bit, but I see myself now trying to encourage the youngsters into the industry. I know we're going to touch on it later, but I think that's probably, I don't feel my age. I mean, that's, I think we're all like that. When you're young, you look at people my age, you think, God, they're old. And I don't. And then when the older people go, I don't feel my age, and you don't understand that. And I think I'm 54. I do not feel 54. I'm like, so.
Yeah, I get that completely. I turned 40 last week, and I remember thinking when I'm 20, when I'm 40, I'll feel 40. Looking at 40-year-olds and going, oof. But you don't. Obviously, you change, and you probably change more than you think. But I don't feel 40. I feel exactly the same. I'm just probably a little bit more boring than I was when it was 20 lifestyle-wise, and I'm okay with that.
I'm sure not.
Yeah, but I completely understand that. Let's talk about that first, because what I loved about our pre-conversation was when I asked you what are you passionate about. The first thing you said was the future generation, and I absolutely love that because one of the reasons for starting this podcast was to bring awareness to the industry. And I think anything which helps the new generation and helps manufacturing engineering is important. And there's an obvious problem, there's an obvious challenge in this country. And more people like you standing up for it and talking about it and talking about it on platforms like this is really crucial. So I'd be keen to know initially why that's important to you, would you say? Because some companies, it's important then because they want to improve their business, which is fine. They want to make sure that the future generation of their business is ready. But for you, it didn't seem about that. It was more about the actual generation and the industry piece itself. Have I called that right?
You have, yeah. I think for me, I mean, I fell into this business. I hadn't. Well, I left university. I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I literally ended up at a random interview at Avnet. And we all know Avnet, 22 billion pound distribution company, and just sort of fell into the industry. I did electronics at university and was really bad at it, but I found I was an only child and very shy, but there was a point in my life where everything flipped, and I realised I was quite funny and I could talk to people. And so I found that being in an industry which is what we're in, which is distribution, it's a people business, and you have to talk to people. So I sort of fell into it, but I've absolutely loved every minute of it. Every day is different. There's so many facets of the whole business, and it's sad to see, especially these days. And so yeah, for me, it's like I can see the challenges. We will probably have both retired before the reality hits, but we are running out of people. And it's where are these people going to be coming from to run the business? The world is electronics, right? I mean, hardware and software runs the world. If that stopped, we saw a very small glimpse of it during COVID, after when we had the component shortages, and literally all of a sudden panic ensued. And that was just the computer chips. But if someone stopped designing those, and so yeah, that for me, because I've loved it, I want to sort of encourage and enthuse the next generation, because I can see the gaps, and I think the hardest challenge for certainly electronics, nothing happens. If you're doing like mechanical engineering, you move things, right?
Yeah.
Things are moving, and you can see, well, if you do this happens. With electronics, it's a box in the corner. So I think that's the hardest thing. How do you encourage people to do something when nothing happens? There's no physical reaction to whatever you do. But yeah, no, you're right. And I've sort of dabbled with it previously. Well, early stages of Nano, I was working for a trade organization. And the problem is, I don't know how you solve it, because it's too big.
Yeah.
That people are doing things in small bits in isolation. And it's not just the UK, it's worldwide. And I think and obviously this is a very old man comment now, but you look at the generation and you look at things like TikTok and YouTube you can earn so much money by being an idiot online. Why would you work?
Yeah, I know. And actually, I think one of the biggest problem is patience, the lack of patience. People don't grow up with patience. And I see it in my kids, they're growing up with iPads, and we're quite old school parents in the sense that we really try and limit that, really try and limit how much they're on it. But there's got to be balance. But, they're literally, we had 4 channels. I remember when Channel 5 came and it was just massive thing. It's not their fault. They're growing up with everything, and they don't have to work hard to have things like that. It's a complete different landscape. But so it isn't their fault. But how do we leverage that? Because why do people want to go over to? Is it because people want to be famous? Is it because they want to get rich quick? It's tricky, isn't it? Because the world is changing very quickly.
Yeah, it is. But I think I don't know. I mean, I see. We talk to young engineers, and they're very enthusiastic, but the pool is very small these days.
Yeah.
Back in the day, people wanted to do things, but yeah, that I don't know. It's a challenge. I mean, yeah, like I said, I think ultimately it comes down to money, right?
Yeah.
People see these influencers earning massive amounts of money and thinking, well, if I go and work in Tesco's, I'm not going to earn anywhere near that, but I can do it online, and it's. Yeah, the world has to change, but something will stop, because TikTok is great, but if if technology doesn't advance and keep that platform running, then it will stop. And the only way to keep that technology and platform running is someone's got to maintain it and develop it, and those people are not there.
Does that link with purpose to some extent? Because I also think that the advantage we have is people are more connected, I think, to purpose than before. I think if you look at 30, 40 years ago, people were, if you put a poll out there, the main motivation would be probably job security. You know, how do I work? If I get to this apprenticeship, can I be here for 30 years? Because that's what my dad did and that's what my granddad did. I think that's massively changed now. And actually, the new generation want to be part of something, whether that's something which is connected to sustainability, whether that's something connected to something good. But actually, you mentioned yourself there, you know, the electronics piece is interesting because electronics does run the world and it stops without it. And that in itself is quite a big statement for a business to promote what they do, because these things don't work without me. It's the old putting them out there, asking the cleaner and asking what she do. I help put them on the moon, isn't it? It's that type of stuff. Do you think that's an opportunity where companies can leverage that and really sort of push on that sort of purpose piece?
Yes. I think the biggest problem, certainly, and I can only really talk about electronics and the semiconductor industry that I've worked in, it's really bad at marketing itself.
Yeah.
So absolutely. I mean, everybody's got a reason to be, right? I've always put people into two categories, which is altruism and money. So you either want to be a doctor or a nurse because you've always wanted to be and you want to be helpful people, which I guess you could probably put purpose into that as well. That the goal is not the financial reward; it's about that journey. Most people, I think, fall into I just want to get paid and I want to earn a load of money, and ideally, I want to do less for it. And I think when I talk to kids and electronics is so, and to some extent probably manufacturing, but certainly electronics, it's so hidden under many layers. People don't know what's involved. And I think, again, I've sort of done the rounds. And for me, my biggest frustration, and obviously we want to, it's a very flat sector, i.e. there's no gender issues or color issues or anything like that. If you can do the job, you can do the job, and people don't really care, what you identify as or anything like that. But getting girls into engineering, I think, is really important.
Yeah.
But if you Google it, and because I did a piece on this a couple of years ago, if you actually Google female engineer, at least 80% of the videos or the images are hard hat, high vis, and a spanner.
Yeah.
That is completely nothing to do with electronics. So obviously, so you've got girls that don't want to do that, but then you've also got parents going, well, you can earn what you shouldn't. You don't want to be an engineer. You want to be a doctor. I guarantee if you're an engineer, you will earn twice as much money as a doctor,
less hours,
do less hours in a nicer environment, and you're not dealing with the public. But that's not there, right? So how do we get that message across that these things exist? And I think, again, I got involved with a group up in the northeast. Again, one of these, and they were trying to encourage children, sort of primary school, about engineering and manufacturing, and this was just engineering in general. And the first question they asked the children is, "What's an engineer?" And do you know what the most common answer was?
Go on.
Someone who fixes cars.
Yeah, doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
That's the problem. And then there were some really good ideas because they were asking them to come up with engineering solutions to a problem, and there were some really cool ideas in this little competition. But the problem is the education system doesn't support it. And without being sort of rude, it is a fact. Primary school, 90% teachers are female of certain age and certain ability. They don't understand engineering, so they can't pass it on. Then you get to middle school and it's not taught. So all of a sudden that enthusiasm that might be there is just beaten out of them to the point that it's a really big problem, right? Government ultimately needs to go manufacturing, and that's across the board. I don't think we've really focused on manufacturing since coal and steel went.
Because they don't understand it. They still don't understand it because they've never worked in it. That's the problem, isn't it? So
exactly. and until somebody goes, we need to drive this down. And I know there's lots of groups trying really hard to do this. It has to be completely agnostic from government, because the problem with government is they come and go, right? They have their own agendas and policies, and that's what, because they are focusing on their career, not. So we need a completely independent group that will just focus on it and try and do something.
Yeah.
But it's, like I said, it's not just the UK problem; it's a worldwide problem. People are not going into these industries.
Yeah.
And I don't know the answer to that one. That's way bigger than me. I'll have retired and probably dead by the time something good happens. But if we can do our little bits, and encourage people, when we do trade shows, we get students come up to us, and if they're being sensible and not being stupid and just getting there for freebies, I will actively encourage them. Say, if you're doing electronics, stick with it. Here's the industry. If you're interested, here's the sort of areas of the business you should look at in terms of and you can earn some good money in this. I've talked about FPGAs, and that's sort of the stuff I used to sell. And FPGA engineers are really, really hard to find, and they can earn a lot of money. And when you start saying that to students, they're like, really? And you're like, yeah. Focus on that. There's, again, I tried to do something, but again, it's just all about trying to get enough people involved.
Yeah.
But there is no central knowledge center for information. So if a kid goes, oh, I'm interested in this, where do they go?
Yeah.
And if you go on any government type thing, you're just going to get lost in the noise, because it's just poor.
Yeah.
We need something from industry for industry that says, if you're interested in this, this is what we do as a business. Someone needs to collate that. And that's, I think, trying to get all these little groups that are trying to do the right thing in certain areas all together. That's a job in itself, right?
And you know what? I think you have answered it. You've answered it because there's no one answer. That's the point. There's so many little things that we need to do, because it's not an overnight solution. It's not even a decade solution, but all these things are so important, because I completely agree with you. The curriculum, the school curriculums, let's be honest, for years it's all been about passing exams so schools can get good Ofsted reports. It's as simple as that. It's never been about getting people ready for employment, or it might have been, but employment has moved on so much that it's just not fit for it. You look at STEM and the types of maths and physics and subjects that they need to. It's even if they do those subjects, it's not connected to what they need now. How much is technology, AI, automation? It's all moved on, which is amazing stuff. Like it's fascinating, and that needs to be somehow started to be drilled into to kids at a young age, because it's exciting stuff as well. But I completely agree with you. It's that lack of awareness piece, and I do think actually that missing gap, which is the obvious one, is the parents piece. Because let's be honest, at 15, 16, even that age, who knows what they want to do? Not many people. You get the odd. I mean, my wife's a teacher. Both I've got a 5-year-old and 9-year-old. They both say at this stage they want to be teachers, because they've not, and actually they might be, and hopefully great if they do. But it's because they've not had any other exposure to any other types of employment, really. My job's not the sort of job you sort of talk about very often. It's different at teaching. But if they had, and when you do, then, and you talk about that industry in terms of what they can see. I mean, there's so many unbelievable factories in this region, which is just fascinating. And if kids walk around it, like Nissan itself is amazing, but there's companies like SMD, Solar Machine Dynamics, who these are companies who make subsea, literally robots under the sea, which will blow people's mind. And when do you ever see an advert to go to attract the school kids to go, you can earn £100,000? Because you don't see it, because companies are scared to do it. But you do see it for go on TikTok or YouTube, how to make 100 grand in a month. Do you know what I mean? Which is, and that's all. It's all get quick, rich. So why not press on the, like you said before, you either want to be a doctor or you want to earn money. If you want to earn money, great, you can do it in this sector, and this is how you do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we did have a conversation. I did try and start something, but the problem is, obviously, one, we've got day jobs, right? And then it's just trying to get people motivated. But I wanted to create basically an industry directory, obviously just focusing on electronics, but it could be expanded, which literally just lists job profiles.
Yeah.
So electronics engineer, in medical earns X to Y. and sort of this is the basic job spec. FPGA design engineer does this, and this is the sort of thing. So you can then, so it's almost searchable. So if I'm interested in cars, well, here's all the automotive things. But the big headliner is the sort of salary range, because I think it surprised so many people how much you can earn. Because people think like doctor, you earn a lot of money. Well, yeah, you do, but I mean, head teachers, I was surprised how much head teachers earn. But as a junior engineer, you can earn a lot more than it is scary, and it needs some group to. And I know people are trying, and there's lots of these sort of things, but I think the problem I see, and again, I don't want to get too political, but everyone sort of does what they think and then tries to get government involved.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing. Don't get government involved. I think that has to be,
too inconsistent.
It is, and it's never going to be, because fads come and go. I mean, I saw that when they were talking about semiconductors, and it's embarrassing. They haven't got a clue, and they're only interested because obviously some large car company back in the day when we couldn't get parts was complaining. They haven't got a clue. They're not going to invest in it. We're not going to get fabs in the UK. We can innovate and we can develop stuff, but let's be realistic. We have fabs in the UK and at a certain level, and we should absolutely be investing in those compound semiconductors. There's lots of good stuff going on there, but we're not going to get an Intel high-end fab.
Yeah.
So let's be realistic, but let's focus on what we do. And I've even just things like startups and investing in people with ideas. I'm not interested.
No.
It's so hard to get money, and if you've got an idea, it's almost impossible to get. Yeah. And I think the whole thing needs basically starting from scratch. But we need an independent group that is just run by businesses for business, that has got maybe some government funding, but the government don't control what goes on.
Yeah, the government funds someone to fund something to start, and everyone else join it. I agree.
It has to be truly independent. Yeah,
100% agree.
Going back to what you said. Yes, I which is why I try and encourage any student or young person I meet that is doing electronics. I absolutely encourage, because we are short. So if that one person continues, then it's a win, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think if there's one thing people can do listening, because you're right, it's not an overnight thing, to attract people in their business, young people, is go after the parents and have open days for apprenticeships, or open days for for parents to come in and walk around, because ultimately it's the parents that give people a kick up the arse when they need it, if they're 15, 16.
It is, and I think that's a lot of people miss out. They go for the kids, but yeah, it's like I say, it's influenced by the parents, and and at that age you haven't got a clue what you want to do, right?
No.
There's going to be. I fell into it, and that's the same for a lot of people. So, but if you can find that chink that enthuses them, and the great thing I've always seen with electronics, and I sort of touched on it when we spoke pre-setting up, we're trying to do something around with the IPC around manual skills like soldering, because again, what we were talking about is very much focusing on the engineer, right? The people designing stuff, but what about the people that run the surface mount lines, or build the boards, or do the cable assemblies, or do the soldering? They're not coming through either, because it's not taught. So and again, I was probably in that zone. I was academically okay, and there's a level where when you're at university, you probably think, no, it's not really for me. So then you end up going somewhere else. But if you knew there was another subsection of the business that you can get involved in electronics, and you can have all the fun, but you end up making the stuff, or how do we tell people that? So yes, it's you can be a buyer. You don't even have to do electronics. You're buying the electronics. Like my wife, she does all the buying. She now knows what the difference is between an 0603 and an 0805 and connectors and stuff. So you get involved in tech without really having to know tech. Yeah. And you're then working for companies that are doing cool stuff. So
100%. I mean, look, we've got a HR director role. I mean, for 120 grand. You know what I mean? 120k. It's a lot of money. So there is those opportunities are out there. Yeah, you talk about that manual skill place, and obviously you're absolutely right. That's probably going to be the biggest challenge, I would say, still, to attract people for these. Your panel wiremen, your turners, your fitters, all that piece. The solders. It's going to be difficult. Where do you see things changing? If you look at the electronics industry in isolation, Do you see it changing with the influx of AI and automation? How do you see that sort of integrating with that?
Not really. I mean, I don't. I hate it when people say AI because AI doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Um, basically, AI is not AI, right? It's not. It's not intelligent. It's just. It's a database.
Mhm.
It's just very quick googling. Um, I think. I think to some extent, as what we were talking about, the lack of skills is going to force people into automation because they've got no choice.
Yeah.
Because they can't get the people, so they've got to come up with another way. But if you look at the processes for just one, designing a circuit board, right? A human has to do that. I've seen there is a company selling sort of a computer aided design, so you can pick blocks. I could see that happening in a few years, where it's almost like you have a library of functions and then the computer does it. But that's clunky, right? Because it's not the real world. So you still need people someone to understand what the real world application is and how you make things work. And then once you've done that, you've got to have someone that's got to create the circuit boards,
Mhm.
which obviously involves humans redoing things. There's chemicals involved and processes. So while there's machines doing things, someone's still got to interpret and fill the gaps. And then you're putting the components on the boards. Someone's still got to take those and the machine does something wrong. Someone's got to interpret that. We're not getting rid of people. You're never going to get that end-to-end software. It's not going to happen. Yeah, we can get rid of some functions, but it's still human-driven. Someone's got to interpret the real world, and no computer on earth is ever going to be able to do that. So I think automation is being forced on us in certain industries. There is an element, obviously, of cost, right? Obviously, a robot can run 24/7 and doesn't complain or have tea breaks, but that's been happening since the 70s, really. And that will continue. There's going to be areas where that will continue to happen, but we're not getting rid of people, so we need people to interpret the data.
Yeah.
And talking about AI, we're decades away from what you class as artificial intelligence. There's some cool stuff going on. I'd be more scared of quantum computing than AI.
It's interesting because I think obviously it's completely changing the industry. There will be less people in the industry to some long term, I think, but I think there still will be a lot of human interaction element to it. Those skills will just change. They'll just get more mature. I guess as simple as that.
Yeah.
It's all these people. I think gone are the day. You might not see some of the size of factories you have now in terms of moving forwards, the amount of manual work. I think it will go a little bit more automated, but I think more often than not the skills will just change and we'll just have to change with it. Apologies for interrupting this episode with a very quick announcement about my business. Theo James are a specialist talent provider specifically to the manufacturing and engineering sector. I'm incredibly proud of what we've achieved since our inception in 2015. We specialize in roles from semi-skilled trades right the way up to our TJ exec search arm of the business, both on the contract and permanent side. We offer both bespoke one-off campaigns for hard-to-fill roles or a full partnership service where we become an extension of your business. For any information, please get in touch with me or the team. I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. Thank you. I think a lot of people can learn from you and also what Nano do. So if you wouldn't mind, give me a brief sort of rundown of what Nano do and your business do. That would be ideal because I think there's some lessons there.
Oh yeah. So, if I just give you a quick potted history of what I've done, because that's sort of, I guess, because my wife says to me, "Would you wish you'd done this years ago?" And I'm like, "No, because I couldn't have done it years ago." Because it was almost like sometimes I don't know if you look back on your career, but sometimes you look back and go, it's sort of everything. This decision got to me to this point. If I'd made a different decision, I wouldn't be doing this. So like I said, I left university. I did electronics, but I sort of fell into the industry working at Avnet. I ended up being Xilinx product manager. So for a number of years, I was selling semiconductors. So FPGAs and high-end solutions. So I spent most of I guess my formative learning years dealing with engineers and understanding engineers and listening to what they say rather than just dictating. And then I got involved. So I've sort of done that. I've worked for some large and smaller organizations in component distribution. Then I got involved in component kitting and contract manufacturing. So I've got a sort of a good spread of electronics. And obviously I see all the challenges and what goes on. And I get, my biggest frustration in life is faff. When people, I'm sure you've been to sales meetings where you spend 2 hours in the meeting and you come out going, I've just wasted 2 hours of my life because nothing's been resolved, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, what's the point? So that's my biggest frustration, is there's lots of wasted time and fanning around for no apparent reason. And again, without boring you in the minutiae of how I came up with this, I had this idea and I'd sort of dabbled with it while working somewhere else. And then we obviously had COVID and then the global component shortage. So it was all a little bit, and I said to my wife, I've got this idea, I don't really want to work for anyone else, because we all know bosses are idiots, right? We could always do better than them. So it's like, I can't work for anyone else. What do I do? And I've got this idea. So I sort of spoke to a couple of suppliers, spoke to a couple of customers, and it's a great idea. So it sort of evolved slightly, but the way I normally describe it to a layman is think travel agent, but for electronics. It's exactly the same process. So I'm very clear to say we're not a kitting company and we're not a broker, because they bring up different images. So travel agent, because it took me a while trying to work out how do I, and it was like, well, that's the best analogy. So if you want to go on holiday, you can do it yourself, right? You can go, I want to go to Spain. I've not been to this area before, but I've heard it's nice. So you'll then go on Google and do some research and Expedia and Booking.com and do all that. Then you might ring the hotel up and say, look, I'm bringing some family, and try and find a deal. Then you've got to get your flights and your insurance and your parking. Or you go to TUI and say, I want to go to Spain, what can you do? And they've already done the work, right? They've already gone to Spain, identified some hotels and said, look, we're going to bring some tourists in, negotiate room rates, and they just sort it for you. Now, the following year, you could absolutely do it yourself, because you know the hotel you've just been to, you know the airline, you could go. But then sometimes you're like, I haven't got time to manage. I'll just go back to TUI again, because I'm not saving any, either I'm not saving more money, or it's not really costing me a lot more. So yeah, I'll just go with the easy route. So we apply the same thing. So the bulk of what we do is on PCB assembly, so contract manufacturing. For a contract manufacturer, so a factory doing that, they have two issues. It's capability and capacity. And they're always juggling that. So capacity is always an issue, right? Is they can only sell what the factory can do. So if the factory is busy, it's busy, and they can't change that. They might be running, put extra shifts on, but there's a cost to that. So often they'll be trying to compromise with customers, or even saying to customers, I can't do it at the moment, and trying to hold on to that customer. And then you've got capability, where the customer is an existing customer and they want something different that the CM can't do, but the CM doesn't really want them to go elsewhere, because then they potentially lose. So, and then often in the quote process, customers, like we all do, go and get 3 quotes. They'll send out 2 or 3 quotes. But only one ever wins the business. But two factories will do the same amount of work to not get it. So if they're doing that repeatedly, they're wasting so much time just quoting. And often then there's a reluctance to quote, and it all becomes a bit messy. From a customer point of view, there's 205, something like that, contract manufacturers in this country. So there's a big pool to start with, now big to little. So where do you start? If you don't know, most people will then go on referral. So they'll ring their current suppliers or sales reps and say, can you recommend? So they've got to spend some time trying to find those. Then they've got to send out their inquiry. So they send out the 3 quotes. They'll get loads of questions come back. Could be the same question 3 times or different questions, which they've got to field. They'll get then 3 prices back. Now, unfortunately, customers being customers, because we're all people, right? I guarantee that if they send out 3 quotes and they get 2 back really quickly, they will still wait for the 3rd one, because you never know, right? Yeah. So it could. So all of a sudden, if that 3 takes 2 weeks, they're waiting 2 weeks, where the other 2 have already quoted in a few days. So anyway, they go through that process. They'll get 3 prices. They'll make a decision. They may need to go visit the factories, and that takes time. Place the order. Everything's fine. Then a few minutes later, they say, "Oh, we want some more," and we're a bit busy at the moment. It's going to be a bit longer. So there's this big cycle of pain just in that. And I think that the biggest take on everything in this industry is paranoia. If I said to you, I'm working with Fred Blogs, then people think, well, now you know that, you'll go to Fred Blogs and cut me out of the loop, and I lose. Okay.
It's not like a trust.
There's still this fear factor of, and it's I can Google these companies, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, it's not that hard. Why are we making it so hard? So we do similar to the travel agent model. We sit between the customer and the supply chain. So we've gone out and identified a whole bunch of factories that do different things that are special, that are good at what they do. So we've got, small CEMs that want sort of 2-3 man bands all the way up to multi-million pound CEMs. We've got 13. We're just about to take on the 14th all in the UK. We've also got then cable assembly companies. We've got 3 of those, and then a whole bunch of design guys. So the customer comes to us and says, right, can you get me this made? Yeah, we can. So we quote the bill of materials once. We manage that. So all the CM has to do is quote assembly. So their time is reduced. We buy all the materials, so they don't have to do all the stock in and all that. They can just build from a kit. So their time in their agro factory is reduced. Customer gets what they want. And what we say is we match the work to the right factory. So if it's prototypes or small batch, we'll get guys that want to do it. Not the guys that do production but will reluctantly do it just because they don't want to lose the work. We're like, well, it doesn't matter. And what we say is, well, we offer what we call our Nano NRE, so one tooling charge. So when you're having stuff made, there's normally a stencil price or programming or there's a one-off cost. So if we get the prototypes made, that might say cost 500 quid for all the tooling. But what it means is, if we say, actually, now we're going from prototypes to production, so we'll move it to another factory. We don't charge the customer again. We just absorb that as a cost because it's like a few hundred quid. So the customer gets the full flexibility of being able to do, without having all the faffing around of adding new suppliers. And obviously, certain big companies, it's always difficult to put new suppliers on the books, because they've got to go through approval processes or NDAs or what. We're like, well, you've got access to 20 suppliers through one. So that's the kitting company thing. So really, it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
We very much focus on small, medium batch,
okay.
Which is where a lot of the agro is. Obviously, if a customer says, "Oh, I want 1,000 a month," and places one order, they can do it themselves. They don't need me. I can handle it, but I don't add any value, and it sort of works. And we know, and it's fully transparent. So the customer knows who the suppliers are. We introduce them. We say why we've chosen them. There's no middleman fee. So we get our preferential rates from our suppliers because they're not doing so much work. They just get, it's easy. We manage all the credit, the customer, the stock. All they got to do is build it. Now, the customer, the CMs can build it. If it's regular, we're happy to let them order the materials. Or, if it's like, say, medical, which is under certification, they can place the order direct on the CM, but we stay as the salesperson. So the point of contact remains 100% with Nano. So from a customer point of view, it's easy. They just go, Steve, can you sort this out? And some customers don't care. And I think that was the biggest thing for me when I've been doing manufacturing. Most customers really, it doesn't make a difference. Yeah, it used to be back in the day, they wanted the factory nearby because they could visit. It doesn't happen. I can count on the fingers of one hand how many times it's actually been necessary. And even if it is, it's a one-off visit. But if they do, then you choose a supplier that's nearby. But ultimately, most companies just want stuff made that works and is on time.
Yeah, it's interesting. So out of all, obviously now you are an expert at setting this up for businesses. What would you say, if a business was to do this themselves, and I guess, I guess if you were to set up again for a company tomorrow, what would you say the biggest pitfalls or the biggest lessons you've learned where you go, actually, these are the key things that we need to look for to make X, Y, and Z run smoothly, would you say?
Obviously, being slightly industry unspecific, don't try and do too much. Is one. Be very clear on what you want to be. Don't try and please everybody. Obviously, there's look at your market, right? What's everyone doing? What's people doing wrong? But be very specific. If you focus in, as I say, stay in your lane, right? You're very good at one. Just focus on that. And don't be. So I've been told many times, don't be busy fools. We can all do that, right? Where we can spend loads and loads of time doing stuff and not earning any money. Ultimately, you're in business to make money. So sometimes be brutal and go, well, yeah, I could do that, but it's not going to earn me anything. I think it's about focus, and especially when you're small and growing. And don't try. You don't have to run. Like I said, we're in a nice position now. But I remember when I first started, it was like, can I afford to take this £1,000 order because I've got to pay for it. I'm very proud that we we always pay our suppliers, even if we haven't been paid. We're very clear on that. It's just my thing. I don't want to be that guy, right? And so, yeah, we're very clear on that. But yeah, just start small and just build up. But I'd say the definite one is focus.
Okay, no, that's good advice. Are you seeing any? You look at the supply chain piece. Are you seeing any trends at the moment where that's people, onshoring, where that's people just going for price over quality? Are you seeing any changes, now versus a few years ago? Would you say?
Yeah, I think probably last year there was a lot of conversation about reshoring and bringing stuff back. I think certainly the COVID / component sort of helped in that regard.
Yeah.
It's a difficult one. It opens up I get on my soapbox about the whole thing. The biggest problem is we've created a monster that we can't put back in the box. I just sort of expanding on that is the world is rubbish in terms of there's too much stuff. I mean, you go to Costco or look at Temu. Why do we need so much stuff? we just fill and we've created this machine of disposable rubbish, and so we expect disposable and cheap. Now, and so I feel for some companies that are in that middle of that and go, well, we've got to put our prices up. But if they put their prices up, people won't buy it.
Yeah.
Because there's already an expectation, right? I saw something on today about the farmers, saying, well, because they're being squeezed by the supermarkets because we won't accept an extra 20p on milk. That's not, then the farmers are still having to, sell it for £1.40 because we won't accept it. At some point, something's got to give where we go, we've all got to accept. We've got to pay more for the world to be better. But it's not going to happen because, we just keep making stuff.
Yeah.
Why do we need a new phone every year? Why do we need all these different cars, all these different models, all this stuff? So, yeah, reshoring, yes, because I think there is certain industries that are concerned about supply chain, and whether that is like IP wandering into something else or just not having that control. I think certainly with COVID there was certain people realized how fragile it was, but I think that is just poor purchasing. The problem, the problem was always there. It's been like 10, 20 years. It's been going on. It's obviously driven by the automotive guys because they are so pedantic, and all they do is say, well, we don't want to hold stock, so they expect their next person to hold stock, and stock is dead money, right? So they just push it down the chain. So it was always so fragile that something happened, and then people panic buy. So talking about supply chain, my biggest comment to everybody is work with your suppliers. Tell them, if you can forecast. My biggest frustration, we have customers that they're very much project driven. So they've got empirical data that says, well, for the last 5 years, we've always made 100 of these. But when you ask them to forecast, they won't. You're like, well, give us some, we can pass it on to our suppliers. It's work with your supply chain, because that's the reason we had the component shortage. It was people not telling the next person down the line what was expected, and then panic buying when it all went horribly wrong. I don't think we'd have had a component shortage if it hadn't been for that. I think there was plenty of stock around, but then also people start getting into that, well, it's all about me mentality, right? But yeah, so reshoring, yes, but price is a driving factor, and we see it. You can buy PCBs for no money out of China. They'll assemble them for no money. Where'd you go? And I can see a lot of contract manufacturers struggling this year because of obviously the national insurance thing. That's just killed a lot of companies just purely because they've got to pay more.
Yeah.
Then they have to earn twice of that just to stand still. Then you've obviously got energy costs and stuff, and these are people that they're running factories with. There's a lot of energy consumption, so then they've got to put their prices up, but they can't afford to because there's somebody around the corner that will do it cheaper.
Yeah.
It's challenging, but we as consumers have to expect things have got to go up.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's you've communicated that the controversial but a view I completely agree with. I must apologise, by the way. Shameless plug this, but there's music going off in the background there, and when we play some of the job, music comes on, and it just came on for about 3 minutes.
I didn't hear anything.
Apologies, I didn't mean a shameless plug, but you've communicated that extremely well, and I completely agree because those challenges are real. And you mentioned that, I don't want to get too political, but I think the biggest own goal in the last 3 months has been the budget change in the NI, because we were having so much. There was suddenly a little bit of momentum in the industry, and we sit right in the middle of it, so we can feel it. There was some momentum. Projects were out and still out there, but that change NI, for a 100-man manufacturer, that's 100 grand. That's 100 grand that they've got to find now, which comes straight off the bottom line. And where they're going to find it? They're probably going to find it by either the growth they were going to make, they're not going to make, or they were going to go the opposite way. And and they're literally going to go, okay, we have to cut a couple of heads here, which is literally the opposite to what we need right now as a nation.
Yeah.
It really was.
It does. It de-incentivizes you to do anything. You look and go, what's the point, right? Which we're very asset light. Obviously Nano is just myself and my wife, and we will always take a hit before our factories, because if we do have to shave anything, because they've got people to employ, and so we're aware of that. But yeah, I've got a feel for certain facts. I mean, a lot of them are close anyway. And like you said, all of a sudden you're spending more money. It's coming out the bottom line or out of staff, right? They're going to and then you're talking about automation. They're going to look at it and go, well, can we fire people and get a machine in?
Yeah.
Well, what about these people? They've got families, and then they can't get another job because either of skills or the fact that no one else is going to employ them because they're all struggling. It's I understand that we have to pay something, but I don't know. It almost feels like we need a hard worldwide reset and start again.
I know.
I don't. For me, I don't understand money. Who's got it all? Because everybody's in debt. Who?
Yeah. Print more. You know what I mean? Things that, yeah.
I don't know who this one person is that everyone owes, because it doesn't make. It's almost fictitious, right? It almost feels like, well, let's start again. Yeah. Everybody starts with 10 grand and we go from there.
Yeah. It's always becoming like Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin? What is where's the money? It's if it's in your bank, you can't touch it. So it's no, I completely agree. On a side note, how honourable of you to pay people before you get paid as well, because I think it's such a problem which isn't talked about right now. The payment. Bigger companies are paying people later than they ever have done, and people are accepting it. And it seems the bigger you are, the more acceptable it is, which is nonsense.
Yeah. Could I have a rant about accountants?
Absolutely, yeah.
I'd like. Well, obviously, people are going to listen to this. I'd love some feedback from accountants as to the common excuses. I was on holiday, or the payment run isn't being done. We tell you your invoice is due, weeks ahead of time. I can schedule a payment today. I could pay you and go, I'll set it up and I'll schedule it.
Automation.
Yeah, exactly. Automation. That's easy to do.
Yeah.
Why do they think it's acceptable to just delay things and go, oh, it's on the payment run next week, or I was on holiday, or I just come up with rubbish excuse, and then when you do email them, they never respond.
Yeah, there's no apology as well. There's no apology for being late.
They don't care. It's like, it's just. I mean, that for me, it's my absolute biggest. And I then have to poke my. It's one of those It's one of those. I don't know if it's a British thing or but we don't like chasing money. It's almost like
I know.
It's almost like it feels wrong, right? It feels like I shouldn't be asking, but ultimately you owe me the money because we've contractually completed what we said we were going to do.
Yeah.
It's a really weird, and you're right. And I think the bigger the company, the more they think, well, we've got bigger lawyers, so we'll do it when we feel like it.
We had one last week. A big manufacturer said, "Can you get to 120 days plus 30, 150 days basically?" It was like, well, 120 days end of month. I was like, well, so I'm going to wait 5 months potentially for a payment. It's unbelievable. It really is. Yeah. But the bigger the business, the more they just presume.
Yeah, I mean, well, we've got one. They're a worldwide name. You'll have heard of them. I won't name them, but they are absolutely brilliant. They literally pay.
Right.
You say we always ask for 30 days from invoice just because when I do my sheet, it calculates. It's a lot easier to just add 30 to it and go pay me then.
Yeah.
We accept that most people pay at the end of the month, and most companies will do maybe 1 or 2 runs, and that's fine. But literally, if we say, "Can you?" and they literally pay weekly, so
Right.
so it's like, and it's brilliant. Sometimes money turns up I wasn't expecting because they paid early. I'm like, they're brilliant. And to be fair, most people pay, there or thereabouts. I think for me, I don't mind if you're going to be late. Just tell me you're going to be late.
Yeah. Expectations.
If you and say, you're overdue, just tell me. And if you say, look, it's going to be on the next payment run because for whatever reason it'll be next week, great. It's the stony silence, and like you said, there's no apology. And then the money just turns up, and you're like, really?
Yeah.
And then you're in that. Do I want to work with this customer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then you're like, well, we need business, right? And it's like, because finding customers is hard, and then so it becomes this minefield that So I'd love some accountants to come up with their reasons for just ignoring you and not. And I know that businesses have got to sometimes have to wait for their payments and their customers because we're always a customer of somebody. But just tell me that.
100%, and it links back exactly. I'm sure when you're looking to set up a supply chain for a business, that these are factors, and that they have to be factors. Businesses, when they get paid, because cash. Unfortunately, cash is king, and businesses are killed by cash flow. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. I mean, we're in a really nice position. Obviously, we've got cash in the bank. Like 4 years ago, I was worrying about paying £1,000, but we're in a position where we can pay people without having to be paid. So it's something I pride ourselves on, and my wife is very, very on that. I.e., we'll always pay, if we can, so that we're not that. Like I said, I don't want to be that guy, right? I don't want to be that person trying to come up with excuses.
Yeah, very honourable. But it's normally sometimes at the end of some of my episodes, I have a list of a few questions I throw at you without any planning. This one, I'm probably going to give you one. And this is one that I've started bringing back. This was a feature of the podcast that I've completely stolen from the world's biggest podcast, which is I asked the last guest to give this guest a question. So I can't copyright that, but it's I'm sure you know the podcast. But I had a guest on last week called Jason Penny. Jason is an account manager at Tharsis up in Northumberland. Excellent.
Okay. Oh, well, Tharsis, we've been trying to do stuff with. So
there you go. Could be nice thinking. No pressure. If you answer his question well, I'm sure it'll connect.
Yeah, we wouldn't mind building some of their boards. So if they want to come and speak to me.
Absolutely. Well, Jason's question was, and this could be sort of with leadership. It could be absolutely anything. I would say for you, it's probably the latter. What would you say are your 3 non-negotiables? Would you say?
In terms of what?
You can take that however you want. That could be the way you work. That could be for you in terms of people you work with. That could be clients or companies you work with. But for you, it could be values, purpose-led. What would you say are your sort of 3 non-negotiables that you live by?
Oh, that's a hard one, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Now, you see, this is where you need to plan, because I could sit here for 10 minutes and just stare at you, because well, I guess we can edit that bit. I guess first off for me is penny pinching. That's something that's, I wouldn't say it's not necessarily non-negotiable, but it's a bit bugbear, right? People, I understand that, certain things, if you're making $1 million of something, 1p makes a difference. But I remember, and I won't name them, but I had a boss once that would spend all morning ringing around different garages to find a cheaper tire.
Yeah.
And you're like, why? And customers that constantly, if it's about 5p, then certainly I just walk away. I can't be bothered, because that's going to lead on to other things. They're going to pick at everything. Yeah, I get that money's tight, but we're, so that, communication, as we talked about with the accountant, that is a massive issue for me. Just talk to me. If someone sends me an email, I'll respond, even if you should say got your email on it. So you don't get that stony silence. I've tried to speak to so many suppliers where you send out an inquiry, say, I'm interested in this, and you get nothing. Mm-hmm. Have they read it? Do they care? So going about accountants, are you going to pay? and you just get like tumbleweed blows across the screen. Just tell me. We're all adults. We can deal with it. I'd rather deal with the answer. I'm not great with not knowing. If I know what I'm dealing with, I can deal with it. But it's that, when you don't know, that's where I get a little bit uncomfortable.
Yep.
So just tell me. If it's bad news, I'll deal with it. But I just want to know. So that's 2. I guess I'm fairly relaxed, and I try to get on with most people. I'm not a people person, weirdly, but I always carry that. I say I'm not a public people person. I don't like the public. Other non-negotiables. Can we leave it at 2? Because I can't think of another one.
It's a strong 2. I'll let you have 2. It's a strong 2. Well, look, I just want to thank you, Steve, because this has been I've really enjoyed it. Sometimes these episodes, they're all different. Sometimes they're interviews, I guess, to some extent. This one's been a really, for me, enjoyable conversation, and we've talked about some really important topics. And I think it's, as I said to you at the time, it's really important that this podcast is a platform to help the industry. That's the one purpose of it. And we've talked about some really important things, and I really appreciate your thoughts, which I completely agree with regarding the new generation and what we need to do. And there's not one answer to it. It's everything we've talked about, but ultimately it's everyone coming together as an industry to do something collectively which is going to make a difference. And I think the more we talk about it, the more likely it's going to happen. And if there's one person driving the car thinking, you know what, I could do a little bit more, then that we've helped something. So I want to thank you for that conversation. I love the fact that the way you described Nano as a business in terms of what you do and how that can help people as well. So it's been a great platform to give them awareness to the business you do, and hopefully people can contact you to understand how that a little bit further. And so much more as well. We've had some really important stuff we talked about. If people want to contact you, what's the best way? Is it LinkedIn, Steve, or what's the best way?
Yeah, LinkedIn. Obviously, our website is obviously www.nanoelectronicservices.com, and then obviously you can reach out to us on there. And obviously, anyone listening, as you can tell, right? I love a good gossip. And if I can help anyone, if it's pointers or if there's any students listening, if they just want some help, happy to. We've just got involved with Oxford Brooks racing team, and I'm a 54-year-old guy talking. They all look like they're 12, But I said, look, if you need any help or intros to the industry, just reach out. Obviously you can contact me online or on LinkedIn, and if I can, I will.
Excellent. Well, look, thank you, Steve. Really appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you for setting this up. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening or watching this episode of the Manufacturing Leaders podcast. Please just like or subscribe. It really helps grow the show and obviously improve the industry. If you want any more information about Theo James, as I mentioned midway through the episode, please get in touch with me or the team. I would love to talk about how we can help you directly or your business. We are more than just a recruiter, and I know people say that, but it's something I'm incredibly passionate about. We are in business for much more than just a bums on seats approach. We want to help people grow. We want to help improve their lives. And ultimately, I want to work with businesses and people who share the same values as we do. And that's something I'm incredibly passionate about. So please, if that is you and you are passionate about that dream role or passionate about your people, please get in touch with me or the team. I would absolutely love to talk a bit more detail. Thank you very much. Speak soon.